Okay, welcome to Chapter 9, Lesson 3, Two-Way Tables. Our learning target or objective for this lesson is to construct and interpret two-way tables. We have two vocabulary words for this lesson: relative frequency. That's the ratio of the value of the subtotal to the value of the total. It sounds foreign maybe now, but we'll get into the tables and we'll talk about relative frequency. And a two-way table shows data from one sample group as it relates to two different categories. Okay, once again, you can always pause the video to write down your definitions and then continue at your own pace. Okay, we're going to look at a two-way table here. Here they're talking about playing a sport at the top. If they're asked questions, if you play a sport, do not play a sport, and then also then on the left-hand side down, if they made the honor roll or not. So first thing we're going to talk about is rows and columns. Rows go left to right. So anything going that way is a row, and the columns are up at top. The columns go down. So when you look at a two-way table, they say look at the rows. Rows go left to right, columns go up and down. Make sure you understand those ones. Okay, then just looking at this, we looked at one of our definitions, relative frequency is subtotal versus a total. You can do that a couple different ways. You can look at students who play a sport and then are on the honor roll. So let's look at the students who play a sport and are on the honor roll. There's 250 of them. And the relative frequency of students who play a sport and then are on or not the honor roll is out of 295, which is out of the total. The RF, relative frequency of play a sport, and honor roll or not. That gives us the relative frequency of that play a sport and either on the honor roll or not on the honor roll. It's 250 out of 295. It's the relative frequency of that. You can look at the data very many different ways in a two-way table. We could go, out of the total number of students, we could do the relative frequency out of total students. Total students was 440. If you look down here, in the bottom right, tells you the total of students there, 440. Once again, they play a sport and they're on the honor roll. It's 250 out of 440. That gives you the relative frequency of playing a sport and on the honor roll out of total number of students surveyed in this for this table. So two-way tables give you a lot of information. You can interpret them many different ways. Okay, but the important thing is to keep on the columns or up and down, rows or side to side. And we're going to take a look at an example. Okay, Felipe surveyed students at his high school. He found that 78 students own a cell phone and 57 of those students own an MP3 player. There are 13 students that do not own a cell phone but own an MP3 player. 9 students do not own either device. Construct a two-way table summarizing the data. So you see they filled in the information that was given. We have to figure out to fill in the holes. Okay, we can look at the first row, the cell phone. Any students that have a cell phone, there's a total of 78 total have a cell phone, and 57 have an MP3 player. So to find out how many do not have an MP3 player, what do you think we need to do? We are going to have to subtract the 78 minus the 57. It's going to give you 21. So right there's 21 students who have a cell phone but do not have an MP3 player. Okay, what else? What other box can we fill in? We can fill in, let's look across the row of no cell phone. 13 have an MP3 player, 9 do not. So the total who do not have a cell phone would be 13 plus 9, give you 22. Now we're just filling in totals right down the bottom. So you would just add MP3 player, 57 plus 13 is going to give you 70. No MP3 player, 21 plus 9 gives you 30. And then we can here's where you can see if you made a mistake or not. So if we add up the row the bottom here, 70 plus 30 is 100. Now if we go to the column, 78 plus 22 should equal 100, and it does. So you have a double check system there at the end, so just in case if you made a mistake, you can sort of figure out where your problem is. So there's how you fill out a two-way table. And we're going to take a look at one more example. Find and interpret the relative frequency of students in the survey from example 1 by row. Okay, so we're going to find the relative frequency of students in the survey from example 1 by the row. So what are we going to do here? Relative frequency. Once again, you're just checking a couple things over. We're going by rows, so we're going to be going from left to right. Our rows here. The relative frequency of having an MP3 player and a cell phone. You have 57 that do over how many? 78 total. Now our next one would be the relative frequency of no MP3 player. No MP3, but has a cell. So you have 21 over 78. Now we can, the bottom row is no cell, but an MP3. And it's 13 out of, and then you go to their total, which was 22. So 13 out of 22 students have no cell phone, but an MP3 player. And the last box we're going to look at, no MP3 and no cell. The relative frequency of that would be 9 over 22. Okay. That would be suffice, or if the question asks for a percentage, you would just take 57 and take this one, 57 over 78, divide that, and you would get your 0.73 or 73%. So either way, a fraction, I'll take it, or as a percentage or decimal. Either way is fine with me. So there's just how you interpret the relative frequency by rows in this example. Okay, any questions? You may just review the video about two-way tables. Have any questions, please write them down, bring them to class. This ends lesson 3.